Welcome to year 3 of the Funding Love podcast with Mal and Kate. We are two adoptive moms that seek to love, support, and elevate all corners of the adoption triad while running our nonprofit Funding Love.
In year 3, we will be talking all about parenting, Disney, adoption, and more with an all-star lineup of incredible guests, both inside and outside the adoption community.
So grab your favorite beverage and pull up a chair,
because everyone has a seat at our table.
Together, we are Funding Love,
the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Funding Love podcast. We are here on episode 112, and today we have a special guest with us. Her name is Lucrece Bundy, and she is a West African native that has resided in Omaha, Nebraska for over 2 decades, and she has helped hundreds of families successfully adopt children as a Christ follower and adoption attorney, and she has founded an adoption education business that provides in-depth adoption information that saves families thousands of dollars, time. Hi, Lucrece. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, it's so good to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yes, this is awesome. Thank you, Lucrece. I'm so excited to meet you in person. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, me too. It's so good to see your faces.
I know. I love that about YouTube. If you are a usual listener to our podcast, you may know that we have recently added video, and it's so great to be able to add that for not only our listeners, now we have viewers. And I have to say, you're nailing it with like the podcast background look. I really need to work on mine.
That was actually all my husband. So I have to give the kudos to him. He's amazing.
Yeah, it looks great. So why don't you tell our listeners, to kick it off, a little bit more about yourself? I gave a little intro there, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you are connected to the adoption community.
Yes, of course. So, yep, my name is Lucrece, and I am an adoption attorney. But I think more than that, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I'm a mom to 3 boys. And my husband and I also started fostering about a year ago. So we have 2 foster kiddos as well. And so the way that I'm connected to the adoption community is through providing legal services. So I'm an adoption attorney and have been an adoption attorney for almost a decade. But I also really, really enjoy guiding families through the adoption process so that they can save a lot of time and money, and for children to be placed in these safe and loving homes.
Yeah, I love that. So I just had to ask, you were an attorney prior to becoming an adoption attorney, is that right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I went to law school because from a very young age, now I know, I mean, then I didn't know, but God had placed a desire in my heart from a very young age to help vulnerable children be placed in safe and loving homes. So from just a very young age, I remember just being from West Africa myself, I knew that there were children that roamed the streets, and orphans. And so my heart always cried out for an answer to that. And I always thought growing up, I always thought once I grow up and I can do whatever I want with my life, I want to be able to put these children in a home. I want them to have a family. And it wasn't until I gave my life to the Lord that I realized that it was actually a desire that He had placed in my heart. And this was actually an assignment that He had given me. And so the process of going to law school I kind of stumbled upon law school. I never actually thought I'd be a lawyer. But yeah, as a lawyer, most of what I do is adoption. So I would say probably 95% of my practice is focused solely on adoptions.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So when would you say adoption, watching, listening? I'm a little delayed, so just work with us, but I can hear everybody. So don't you love technology? So let us know when, I'm curious when in that did adoption come in the mix? You said that you is when you became a Christian, you felt like that shifted. How long had you been practicing?
Yeah. So I've been an attorney since it was when our 3rd son was born. So 2016. Yeah, 2016.
Okay.
And so that's when I opened up my law office, and I started doing adoptions from the get-go. So the very first case I took was a step-parent adoption case.
Got it.
And the reason why is I actually opened my own law firm because traditionally here, well, I think anywhere in the United States, but as an attorney, when you start working for a firm, you have to take whatever cases that they give you. And I felt the conviction from the Lord that I couldn't do divorces and things like that. And so I really wanted to help families stay together. And again, my passion was for children to be placed in safe and loving homes. And so I thought, okay, adoption seems like a great way to help children be placed in safe homes. And so I'll focus on adoptions. And so I started that from the very get go. That was my first case was a step parent adoption case. This lady that I met, I think I went to get, I can't remember where I was. I think it was a chiropractor's office or something. And the secretary was like, "Oh, you're a lawyer, you do adoptions? I need an adoption." And so she graciously allowed me to take her case, and she was my
Oh,
very first client. Yeah. And so I've been doing adoptions ever since.
oh, wow, that's so cool. So, I would love to know too, what was the pivot point in your career, or how long had you done adoption cases that you were like, okay, I am seeing some hiccups along the way of the process for these families. I'm seeing like parts in their path that are difficult to navigate that I could help with. When did you start helping families to better understand and navigate that process through this like I want to say is it a side business or it might be your full-time business, but this side uh piece of what you do in adoption?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what happened was, so as an adoption attorney, I think the biggest misconception that people have is when they think of an adoption attorney, they just think, oh, you can help me adopt a baby, which is actually not the case. There's a lot of different types of adoptions. There's step parent adoptions, foster care adoptions, international adoptions, relative adoptions. And actually, that's mostly what I was doing before I kind of stumbled into the world of newborn adoptions. Just because here in my state in Nebraska, there's just not a lot of people adopting newborns. And there's several reasons why, but I just was doing mostly step parent adoptions and foster care adoptions before I stumbled into newborn adoptions. And so this is kind of how I stumbled into it. One day I got a call from a couple, Tom and Molly, and this was probably about 5 years ago. And they called me because I'm one of the three adoption lawyers in Nebraska. And they were trying to figure out, like, okay, we want to adopt a baby. We're a newlywed couple. How do we go about the process? And so normally what I would tell them is, call such and such agency, because from just my knowledge back then, you had to go through an agency to help you, match with a pregnant mom and all of that. That's the most I knew about newborn adoption. So I gave them a couple of numbers. I said, call them and they'll help you. And I said, once your baby comes home, then call me and then I can help you legalize and finalize the adoption. And so I didn't hear back from them for a while. And so 2 years later, I just was wondering what happened to them. And so I called Molly and I said, hey, whatever, like, what's going on? Is your baby home? And she said, actually, we quit the newborn adoption process altogether. And she told me that they had been scammed by a lawyer in Florida, thousands
Oh,
of
no.
dollars. She said that every single agency they called, including the ones I gave her as references, that they wouldn't accept them because they hadn't been married for long enough. And so after hearing
Wow.
her story, I just thought I was so shocked because I just was not that knee deep into newborn adoptions. I didn't know much about it. And so I just thought that is so strange. Like, why would an attorney like scam you of money for like I was so confused. So I thought, okay, well, I asked her what they did, what kind of research did you do? So I decided to kind of mirror their research online and just kind of find out what it is that they were finding out online to see if the information they were giving me was correct.
Mhm.
And so I started researching online, Googling how to adopt and whatever like a prospective adoptive parent would be, trying to find online. And I was shocked as an attorney. I just could not believe the conflicting information that you would find. Like you go from one website to the next, and it's like two different sets of information.
Mm.
And just being an attorney and having gone through the legalized, like the process of helping people finalize their adoptions here, I knew that the process was pretty much the same all across the United States. There's certain things that you need to know to get through the process. But when I looked online, the information on social media and on the internet were just so confusing. Like even for myself, I was like, I don't understand how this works with that. So
Mhm.
any adoptive family looking at that information, no wonder they'd be confused. No wonder they'd be scammed. And no wonder they just kind of start working with somebody and then figure out later that they just wasted a lot of money. So that's really what spurred me on. Gosh, I really hated what happened to Tom and Molly. They were just such an innocent, beautiful young couple just wanting to grow their family. And I was like, gosh, I wish I could have helped them. Like, if I had known how to help them navigate through the process, they wouldn't have gone through all of this. So I thought, well, I would love to be able to expand my services and provide families with just helping them navigate through the process so that they're not, being scammed and wasting so much money and time trying to figure out how to do it. So that's really what spurred me onto starting this business where I now guide families through the process.
Mm. Can you hear her? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that was my fault. Okay,
Yeah, it's okay. Go
he'll
ahead.
have to splice this. We'll just smile. We do have an editor that will help this. The neighbor's dog is outside yapping. Can y'all hear that dog barking?
I heard a little bit of it, but I think then you muted it.
Okay. Yeah. So, anyways, okay. Do you want to start back, Caitlin? He can take this out
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know am I still delayed?
a little.
Oh.
Just
For
work
me, a
with me.
little
Just
bit.
know that I'm gonna okay, just know that I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
be
yeah.
delayed, but that's
I'm
okay.
trying to like give you
Um,
space to like jump in.
Great, we're pros here.
Okay. All right.
No, so I am sad for your clients that is still that there are still scammers out there in this industry that really but I want to ask you then, like, what would you say to a prospective adoptive family then who is looking at getting into like who want to adopt? What do they look for? Say they're not in Nebraska and and maybe they're not able to use you, or maybe they can use you, or they've started with another agency. What are some red would say, hey, watch for this, or these are some mistakes that I know clients of mine have made before. How can we guide them
Mhm,
away from making some really big mistakes?
mhm,
Yeah. So the guidance that I provide to adoptive families now is for anybody across the United States. So you don't have to be in Nebraska for me to help you guide you through the process, which is really
Okay.
exciting. I love that I can do that.
Yeah.
But so there's three common mistakes that I've seen just across the board from doing this for over almost a decade that I see like families who are very brand new who are just now starting the process that they make consistently. So the first one is getting their home study done as the first thing that they do, because that's one of the common misconceptions. And one of the biggest advice that people give online is if you want to adopt, start your home study.
Hmm.
So this is so wrong because your home study is actually tailored to the type of adoption that you want to do. So what I mean by that is a lot of times when people are starting their adoption process, they're not, at least the families that I've worked with, are not so sure yet if they really want to adopt a newborn or if they're like an age range 0 to 5, or if they're like, oh, maybe I could adopt a toddler and maybe they're considering international adoption. They're kind of exploring their options. And so when you do your home study as the first thing, it actually ends up hurting you because once you do make that decision, like, okay, actually, I want to adopt from foster care or I want to adopt international, if you started off with a newborn adoption home study, you'll have to redo your home study all over again. And that's easily, you just wasted at least $1,500.
mhm,
So I would say that's the number one mistake that families make is just starting off by, just going to do my home study without first taking the time to understand the pros and cons and the cost of each and every type of adoption available to them. The second mistake that I see families make as well is just going with an agency because they saw in a Facebook group or a
mhm,
friend or family member recommended, hey, I use ABC agency, use the same. The reason why that's a big mistake is because not everybody should use an agency. It's kind of like the way I like to explain it is kind of like the difference between using a hotel and Airbnb. Right? Some families love Airbnbs. They're like, I will never stay in a hotel. Some family love hotels. They're like, I'll never stay in an Airbnb. It's just a preference type thing. It's the same thing with the professionals you use for adoption. Just because your friend used an agency doesn't mean that that's the best fit for you. It might be best for you to use a consultant. It might be best for you to use an attorney. And so not understanding that there's so many different adoption professionals that you can use hurts families because most of the time, the families that I talk to who are interested in my program is because they're already started working with an agency. They've already spent 2.5 years, 3 years, they're waiting and nothing is happening. And now they're realizing, oh, well, if I had known that I had all these other options, I would have at least taken the time to explore before I made my decision. But by that point, they've already spent so much money that they feel stuck, like
mhm.
I've already spent 4,500, 5,000, 10,000. Like I don't want to leave that now because now it's like my money's gone and I have to start
Right.
over. Right. It's really daunting. And so that's the number two mistake I see people make is just hire an agency at the get-go. Don't do that. Take the time to really understand all of your options. And then the third thing I would say, that's just more of my recommendation as an attorney is I would say a big mistake is just not investing in the resources that they need to help them navigate through the process. Because I see that a lot of families rely heavily on social media and the internet to figure out how to do the adoption versus
Mhm,
finding a resource from, like a vetted, experienced professional that can actually help them navigate through it. So you might have to invest a little bit up front, but the peace of mind and knowing that, okay, somebody's telling me how to do this. I know the steps to take, I believe is invaluable. And it's helped so many of my families be able to adapt successfully without, losing a lot of time and money. So those would be the three mistakes I would say that I've seen families make over and over again.
Yeah.
So when you say to have like a consultant, we for our first adoption did Christian adoption consultants, and they were very, very helpful in being our advocates through the process because it was our first time, we were so new. And they just kind of guided us on everything that you're saying. When do we do our through? Which one do you do? All of that. Is that what you're referring to when you say that?
Yeah, so I'm not referring specifically to consultants. I'm just referring in general to finding a resource that you can trust that's going to help you navigate through the process well. So I think resources that give you a more broader perspective, right? They can tell you, like, if it's a consultant, they can also tell you, hey, you can use an agency or an attorney,
Yeah.
or you can try to self match. But they tell you all of your options, so you're not just hearing from that one professional how they can help you. You're actually seeing these are all my options. Kind of like, again, with traveling, you can use a hotel or an Airbnb, right? Or VRBO or whatever. Like, these are all my options. Versus if all you knew was a hotel, you would have never known that you could use an Airbnb or VRBO. So having a resource that gives you those options so you can actually explore them and then decide which one is best for you, I think is best for families, just from my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of specific resources do you offer as like an adoption? What title would you give yourself? Are you like a coaching service or like I guess you're a resource for adoptive families to be able to hear all the information, correct?
Yeah. So what I do is I provide an unbiased, streamlined source of everything that first-time hopeful adopted parents need for a successful adoption before, during, and after. And I also personally guide them through the process based on my experience as an adoption lawyer, so that they can save a lot of time and money. And so it's actually called the Adoption Success Accelerator Program. So it's through that program that I guide families through the process. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Oh, I love that. And that is such an important resource that I feel like I love that we're having this conversation because adoption is not something that you should say, "Oh, I want to adopt. Let me just Google and hit go." There's so much more to it, and it's a very heavy. It's complicated. It's not straightforward. That is so important to know getting into this journey, that there's more to it, and having somebody and like you guiding them through every one of those big decisions is so important. And I think that every adoptive family should look into something like that, just like you're
Mhm.
saying, because you're going to be in the weeds. You're going to be over your head, and it's so important.
Yeah, I think it's also for families who feel like they need help, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we all know those people who are like DIYers. They're like, I'll do everything on my own. I mean, it's not for every family. It's for those who are like, wow, I would really love somebody to like show me what to do. I would feel more peaceful and comfortable. And some families just don't want that. They're okay with researching and they want to do it on their own. And that's completely fine too. I mean, I know a lot of families that have adopted that way. They were able to navigate through and they just love doing it on their own. So I don't necessarily think it's for every single family. I think it's for those who are like, wow, I would like help. And I think that this would help me navigate through the process easier so I don't have to do it on.
And I really wish there were more services like that out there and that it was more like when you're Googling, it could be one of the top things that show up. You need to figure out how to get your
I
name at the
know,
top
I
of the
do.
list because, for a lot of families, I know even for us, you don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
Yeah,
And it's like I'm searching for what I don't know, but I
right.
don't know what that is. I just know that I feel called to this or this is the path that we've chosen
Yeah.
and I need to take that first step.
Right.
And so it's hard to get that education out there, but I feel like it's an education that really needs to be out there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
it's been very powerful, honestly, seeing families that, I mean, I have families who had worked with an agency for 2.5 years. They had done research on their own for 6 months before they found this agency. They felt very comfortable with it. But after 2.5 years, they were going nowhere. And so they actually decided, you know what, we're going to just make this a wash because they just were like, we know God's called us to adopt. We don't want to give up. I mean, some families give up after, 3, 4 years, but this family was like, you know what? We need to figure out another way because this is not working. And that's how they found my program. And then within 12 months of joining the program, they brought their baby girl home. And this is not because I'm like, I have babies in my closet, I'm just handing out to people. This is honestly just because they had information they didn't know before. It was just the power of having information that they needed to help them make the right decisions that saved them money and actually reduce the time that it would have taken them to adopt.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that like me and Caitlin are believers and we're pretty vocal about that on our podcast and our YouTube. But I love that you layer that your faith on top of it in
yes.
helping Christian couples or believing couples to find an easier path to what they feel called to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really big. Like for us as believers, one of my biggest passion is just really encouraging believers that when God's calls you to do something, to go forward with it boldly, because we're not like the rest of the world. And so I believe like doing adoption with excellence and being the best adoptive parents that we can be by following the right resources, not just that, but getting the resources that we need to be the best adoptive parents that we can be is so imperative as we are revealing the heart of God to the children that we're bringing in our home. And so I love talking to Christian families who just have a heart to adopt because it's just different. You know what? It's just different than a family who doesn't know God and who is adopting just because they want a family. It's different because this is a calling. This is the Lord saying, I want you to do this. I want you to open up your home to a child from foster care. I want you to adopt an orphan and so that I don't know. I love speaking to families who are there.
Mm-hmm.
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 Oh, wow. I do. I love that you make that part of your mission in your work is specifically partnering with it. Let me ask you this question when it comes to what you do and the services that you provide. You have this like success pack, right? Or this like resource that you can offer adoptive families.
Yeah.
If families want to be more DIY, can they still come to you for the adoption side of things, for the legal side of things that you've helped through the program?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so I actually provide two separate packages, so to speak.
Okay.
And so for those families who are DIY, they're like, okay, just show me how to do it and I'll do it. I don't need to talk to you all the time. Just give me the process. I have that package for them. And then for those who are like, oh my gosh, Lucrece, I need to be talking to you every day. I need you to show me what to do. I need to be able to call you, DM you if you have questions, and I have a separate package for that. So it's basically the difference between you can still get the success package on everything that I teach families on what to do, or you can get it with the consulting, which is you get me actually guiding you through the process for an entire year.
Oh my gosh. Like I would love
Yeah.
to, like a package that included you because I having you in my, like in my pocket to be like, hey, I'm losing my mind. Nothing has happened. I'm just going crazy. And to have you call, I feel like you saying like a prayer with me would just immediately
Yes.
reground me to say like, okay, this is my purpose. Calm
Yes.
down, Kate. Because that was very impactful. That was very impactful for me when we were for our first time through the adoption process. We used Christian adoption consultants, and some of the resources that they offered, I had already done on my own. I had kind of taken in my own. I just did it all on my own. But in that when there really feels like not much is going on, I was losing my mind, like checking my emails, checking my text messages, like, why is nothing happening? Why am I felt like there really was a lot of nothingness, and they centered me. They said, okay, let's go back to your reason here. Let's go back to why you chose this. Let's go back to why you were called here. And they would pray with me and they would remind me of this journey and that the Lord, if I was called to this, the Lord had the baby there. We're not going to miss our baby. Right. And they reminded me of that often. So that is invaluable. And anybody listening who is looking for resource, because those moments can be very lonely, and having that, especially for a believer, somebody to come alongside you and pray you through that is huge.
Yeah. And I think even just checking up on you, I find that a lot of families that are in my program, sometimes it feels easier to feel isolated and to not say anything, even though we have a community of all these families going through it together. it just feels like maybe I shouldn't share. And one of the things I will like call out my family is, where are you? I haven't heard from you for a month. What are you doing? Are you reading a book? You better get back to me. Like just forcing them to come out and just be like, you're okay. Everybody else is going through this. This is normal.
Yeah.
So that
Mhm.
they don't isolate themselves because they're feeling like, oh, I need to share like a big win or something. And
Mm.
when they're waiting, they don't feel like anything is happening. I don't know what to share. I'm like, well, share that nothing is happening.
Mhm.
Share that I'm crying to God right now, because it's
Mhm.
helping you to still be involved, and for for everybody to know like we're all in the same boat right now, It's
Mhm.
what you're going through. So I chase after my families even when I don't hear from them. What are you
Oh,
doing?
wow.
What's happening? Tell me what's going on.
I love that. And do you help families that don't live in Nebraska as well? Can your clients come from all over the US? Like, how far does this span?
Yeah, yeah. So the Adoption Success Accelerator is for any family all across the United States. I cannot help you if you live outside the US because I don't know international law, but anybody in the US, that's what the program was built for.
Yeah, and I feel like it's such a benefit too. I'm thinking about our process, having an attorney that's like you have access to, that you can ask questions to. Because I know in our adoption, we had a layer once we were matched of the fact that our son has Native American in him. So there was like extra things that you needed to know. And I remember our agency like saying, well, we would recommend you use this lawyer because she has experience in that. But had we not had them advise us that way, we could have gone through the process of with a lawyer that wasn't aware that you needed extra permissions or extra forms. I don't know. You know better than me. I know that we had all of our ducks in a row, but sometimes people will get to the end of that process and be like, you don't have everything. You can't finalize. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having an attorney who has the experience with that. I mean, I've done, I think, one or two equal cases in my career because they just don't come as that often. But man, like the extra things that you need to do for ICWA, for, the Indian Child Welfare Act, is like if you don't have an attorney that knows how to do that, you're just kind of. The other
Hmm.
thing I would say too that I always tell families is, after they go through the entire adoption process and they're at the final stretch, like, okay, baby is home. Now we need to just find a lawyer and we need to finalize. I always tell them, make sure that you pick an adoption lawyer, like an experienced adoption lawyer, because that could literally make your last leg of the adoption smooth, or it could bring so much
Mm.
heartache. I mean, like so much heartache. So I want to give you a quick example just to share with people how important it is that you choose an experienced adoption attorney for your adoption. Not all attorneys are created equal, right? Because you have your immigration lawyers, criminal lawyers. You want, in the same way, like you want to find an adoption lawyer. That
Mm.
means that they're specializing in this area, because then the last leg of your process will go so much smoother. So I had a client, I think it was 3 years ago now. Yeah, she feels like it's been forever ago, but it was only like 3 years ago. What happened was they connected with, I think it was a family friend of a family friend or something, and they were going to adopt a baby. And so they traveled to, I can't remember the name of the state, but it was out of state. They lived here, but the baby was born in another state. They traveled to the other state. It sounds like they had an attorney that said that he was going to help them like do the paperwork for the mom and for them. And they didn't know any better. So they said, sure, that sounds great. So the attorney like dropped it up something. They went to the state, they picked up the baby. And on the way back to Nebraska, it dawned on them like, wait, we live in Nebraska. Maybe we should use an attorney here to help us. So then they call me. I don't know. I think they like Googled my name and it just kind of came up. They're like, oh, she's an adoption lawyer, So they called me. They're like, hey, we're bringing this baby home and we want to know how to finalize. So I'm asking them like my checklist. Do you have a home study done? And they said, no. I said, uh-oh, that's the red flag number one. You don't have a home study? You bringing a baby home from out of state? They're like, we didn't know that we were supposed to do that.
My
And
goodness.
and then I said, "Okay, well, did mom have an attorney?" They're like, "Yeah, the attorney represented her and us." And I'm like, I mean, all the red flags, like they literally did
Mhm.
everything wrong that you could do. Come to find out, this attorney was not an experienced adoption lawyer. Okay, so that's why I'm telling you guys this is it is so important. Like, even if your uncle, your aunt, your mom says use this family lawyer, don't use an adoption lawyer, because they understand the complexities of adoptions and know how to go through the process. So this family, it ended up taking about a year and a half to finalize their adoption
Wow.
because they had to go back. We had to retrace steps and redo everything over again. I mean, luckily the mom was pretty set. She was like, she wanted to do the adoption. And so she was
Okay.
okay. So, but if she had changed her mind,
Right.
There goes your adoption. You got to take
Right.
the baby back, you know?
Correct. Yeah.
So if they hadn't found an experienced adoption lawyer, I mean, there's 3 others in my state, and if they had talked to any of the other ones, I would have told them the same thing. But if they hadn't found an experienced adoption lawyer, basically they would have had an adoption that could be annulled at any point, because they didn't do anything right. So
Right.
please use an adoption lawyer when you're getting ready to finalize your adoption.
And
Please,
and
please.
family law is different than adoption law.
Yeah. So the way I like to explain it is like family law is like an umbrella. And under that umbrella, there's divorces, unfortunately, child support, child custody, adoption law. So adoption law is actually under the umbrella of family law. When you look at the legal standpoint, they always group adoption law under family law. But when people think adoptions, they automatically think family lawyer.
Right.
But practically, even though that's kind of how it is, practically, that's not the way it actually works. Practically, you usually will find family lawyers who only do divorces, child support, child custody. And then you have attorneys that specialize in the area of adoption that don't call themselves family lawyers. So like me, I don't call myself a family lawyer because if I do, people will call me for divorces. And so that's why when you see an adoption attorney, what they're trying to tell you is, hey, we focus here and we do this on like a daily basis. And that's our bread and butter. So they're not technically they're family lawyers, but they only do adoptions under that umbrella. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't want a divorce lawyer handling your adoption, and you wouldn't want an adoption lawyer handling your divorce. Like
Exactly.
you have, correct. So you have to go with what you're specialized in, what you know.
Well, because people just think I'll just use a family lawyer because it's an adoption.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, don't make that mistake. Even if it is a family lawyer, make sure that they actually know how to do adoptions as well, because they may do a ton of adoptions as well. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. But before we go, I would just like to know if there is someone listening that is a hopeful adoptive parent, or they're in the process, but they're hitting roadblocks, they're getting frustrated, they feel confused. What is like some practical advice that you'd give them today? Or even encouragement, some encouragement too.
Yeah. I mean, I would say to maybe just take a step back and reassess, right? Instead of just jumping into the next thing, take a step back and reassess. And the first question I would ask is, do you know all of the different types of adoptions available to you? Like, this is like basic 101 adoption. Do you know that you can adopt an older child from foster care, that you can adopt internationally? Do you know all of your options? Because if you don't, I would say start back there and go get the information that you need to understand all the different types of adoptions available to you. The second thing I would say is make a decision and stick with it. Because if you thought newborn adoption is what I want to do, but you're not really sure, it makes it really hard when you hit roadblocks, because then you want to change your mind. So it's really important to take the time to really make your decision. Am I going to adopt internationally? If that's what you want to do, then go all in. And you'll hit roadblocks along the way, but keep going, right? If you're going to do a newborn adoption, then stick with that and go all in, because whichever way you go, you're going a different path, right? Each type of adoption has its own path. So if you're not sure and you're still waffling back and forth, go back and just make that decision so that when you do hit a roadblock, you're not waffling back and forth. That's probably the biggest advice I would give to families who are struggling right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That is so good. And I just want to say thank you for joining us as well. And I want to, I applaud you, because you are in law, which I can't imagine is a very easy industry, and you are following the call of the Lord, and you said yes. And so you are in this, and you are doing this all for His glory. And I can see that. And you are such a blessing. I know you are, to so many families. So I think it is so cool that you have chosen this path, stepped out of your comfort zone, and now we're just blessing so many families. And I'm so thankful to have had you on this show, and hopefully we can continue to keep this relationship and this communication open, because you are such a bright light. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much, you guys. It was such an honor to be here. I'm so grateful to have met you guys and I've been able to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I know our listeners are gaining something from this. And this was just such a fun episode to record. And I just want to say thank you, Mal. This was a great episode. And I want to say thank you. Now I have to say to our listeners and our viewers for tuning in to this episode of the Funding Love Podcast. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Funding Love podcast. We are a crowd-funded nonprofit, which means that people like you can help make a lasting impact in the lives of adoptive families and birth moms. At Funding Love, we create post-adoption experiences that strengthen bonds, build community, and restore people. And when you partner with us, whether that is giving online, signing up to become a monthly donor, or simply buying merchandise from our shop, you are funding love.